Welcome everyone. Apologies for delay in starting. We're just waiting for the host Tony Kingham, who's just had a technical issue, to come back in, and we'll be right with you. In the meantime, I'll just run through some of the housekeeping for you. So on your screen at the right hand side, you'll see a questions and answers tab. So if you'd like to use that when we come to our discussion to ask the panelists any questions and answers, and then we can field those to the audience as required. So welcome to the second series of our webinars with the UNOCT, A View to a Border. The first in the series is the cross-border cooperation and information sharing. So I will hand over to Rocco Messina, the head of the Border Management Unit at the UNCCT, and he will provide a brief welcome for you. Rocco, over to you.
Thank you, Neil. And let's hope Tony can join us. Today was started with the technical, I think, enemies on all fronts. Good morning, good evening from New York, and welcome to our virtual dialogue. For the one of you that followed us in the first season last year, this is still the series of View to a Border, season 2, and welcome. I hope you will find this season also interesting. This is a different format from the previous one, but I will let after my colleague Esther to explain. As a head of the United Nations Counterterrorism Center Border Security Management Unit within the UNOCT, I'm delighted to open the first webinar again of the season 2. And this is a series of technical interactive dialogues devoted to cross-border cooperation and information sharing in the context of counterterrorism and related transnational crime. This, with UNCCT, in partnership with World Border Security Congress, will conduct over the course of the next 4 months. These webinars will be delivered under the framework of the UNCCT Global Counterterrorism Center Global Border Security Management Program. Is designed as a key component of the UNCCT strategy, with the aim to strengthen member states' capacities to prevent the cross-border movement of terrorists and stem the flow of foreign terrorist fighters and returnees. Through the BSM unit, UNCCT is committed to supporting member states to implement comprehensive border security management strategies and national plan of action. Of course, enhance technical and operational capacities, increase interagency and cross-border cooperation and information sharing, all this in line with international human rights law, humanitarian law, and refugee law. As you all know, effective border security and management is the first line of defense in detecting and preventing the movement of terrorists and FTF across border, as well as preventing the smuggling of trafficking of persons, drugs, small arms and light weapons, and other illicit cargo that may be used for terrorist purposes. However, it is important to recognize that measures to counter terrorism may also have far-reaching impacts on the rule of law and human rights, in particular, the rights of privacy, the rights of freedom of movement, the right to liberty and security. Yet, I wish to note that effectively countering terrorism and protecting and promoting human rights are both fully achievable and mutually reinforcing objectives. Timely access to critical information about identified or suspected terrorist activity is a key to counter-terrorism effort, and the exchange of information and cross-border cooperation as critical tools for the investigation and prosecution of terrorist acts and transnational crime. This is as well all the organized criminal network that, of course, facilitate the travel of the terrorists. Of course, only coordinated border security management approach will be effective in countering the terrorist threat. It is, however, it is easier to say than to do. While routinely flagged as critical component of border security management, consistent coordination, cooperation, information sharing have historically been difficult to achieve and remain substantive challenges. Frontline border and law enforcement officials need to have appropriate access to intelligence, biometrics, and financial data to effectively identify and intercept criminal actors, known suspected terrorists, and forest terrorist fighters. The sharing of relevant information between law enforcement authorities in different countries is really key to ensuring appropriate detection and follow-up where a particular individual is considered a security risk. The holders of that information need to put in place all the necessary arrangements that allow it to be shared in real time with all the necessary precautions. During the webinar today, we will hear from experts from international regional organizations who will share with us their first-hand experience, ideas, and success stories in the field for addressing the threat and challenges the member states face in effectively securing their border. Thank you all for joining today. And particularly, I would like to express my appreciation to our guests and friends. And this webinar would not be possible without, of course, their contribution and invaluable insight and perspective. I sincerely hope you find the interactive dialogue interesting and encourage you to actively participate in the question and answer session at the end of the webinar. So without further ado, I will give the floor to my colleague, Mrs. Esther Zubiri, that is a senior expert of our team of the Global Security Management program. And we will also the moderator for this webinar. I will present an overview of the 3 case studies that will be discussed during the upcoming webinars. Esther, please, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Rocco. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Season 2 of A View to a Border. I'm very pleased to be here today to moderate our interactive dialogue. We have a most interesting program for our virtual discussions today. This first webinar, as Rocco mentioned before, will be devoted to present good practices and lessons learned in the context of information sharing and interagency cross-border cooperation to counter terrorism and related transnational organized crime. However, before we start, it is important to mention that the opinions expressed by our experts do not necessarily reflect the views of the Secretariat of the United Nations or the governments of its member states. And now, to get us started, we'll begin with our first session that will lay out on an introduction to the 3 case studies of the upcoming webinars. During the second session of our webinar, representatives from United Nations Counterterrorist Center, the International Organization for Migrations, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and the United Nations Country Office in Burkina Faso will present their first-hand experience and success stories in the implementation of joint projects and their impact on the work of the member states' law enforcement agencies. Let me waste no more time and proceed with the overview of the 3 case studies that will focus the upcoming webinars covering the 3 geographic areas of Western Europe, West Africa, and the Western Balkans.